There is a moment in every relationship, every connection, where the balance of effort begins to shift. At first, things feel mutual, reciprocal, energized. Both people are present, attentive, engaged. But over time, the predictable comfort of someone who gives more than they receive becomes the quiet foundation of a dynamic where one person becomes emotionally full and the other becomes emotionally fed. And when that happens, value begins to distort. The one who offers becomes the one who chases. The one who receives becomes the one who withdraws. And it all happens so subtly that you often don't notice it until you're standing in the middle of the imbalance trying to figure out when exactly everything changed. This is the nature of human attachment. We are drawn to what feels meaningful, but we only recognize meaning when we believe it can be taken from us. Carl Jung wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And this is exactly what happens in relationships. When someone knows you'll always be there, they don't have to face themselves. They don't have to confront their own emotional limitations. They don't have to evaluate how they're showing up, because your presence gives them permission not to. And that's where the slow erosion begins. When you start feeling him pull away, the instinct is to hold tighter, to text more, to prove your loyalty, to become more emotionally available, in hopes of bringing him back to the closeness you once shared. But what you're actually doing is rewarding his distance. You are teaching him that no matter how little he gives, you will compensate. And the more you compensate, the less he has to. This is how emotional inequality is formed. Not through major events, but through these invisible exchanges of energy and expectation. You think, if I show up more, he will remember how good this was. But what he learns instead is, I don't have to try. She will always be there. And once someone believes they can have you unconditionally, without effort, without presence, without consistency, you lose your perceived value in their story. Not because you don't have value, but because value in human relationships is tied to effort, investment, and emotional risk. Without risk, there is no depth. Without effort, there is no meaning. And without the possibility of loss, there is no urgency to keep what one has. This is why stepping back shifts everything. When the comfort of your presence disappears, when the access they once relied on begins to fade, when the emotional reassurance you provided is no longer there, the internal equilibrium of the dynamic is disrupted. And in that disruption, something begins to happen. Silence becomes loud. Absence becomes heavy. The mind begins to search for what it once dismissed. Because when something familiar goes missing, the psyche is forced to confront the space it occupied. This is why Jung emphasized that the loss of something external often forces us to meet parts of ourselves we were avoiding. The loss of you isn't just the loss of your affection. It is the loss of who they got to be when they had you. The validation, the ego comfort, the emotional safety net they never acknowledged but always depended on. So when you remove yourself, not as a tactic but as a necessity, you create a psychological gap that only reflection can fill. This is not about punishment. It's not about trying to make him suffer or chase or regret. It's about aligning your energy with the truth. You cannot hold on to someone by shrinking yourself. You cannot create closeness by abandoning your own needs. And this kind of stepping back is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not fueled by anger. It is quiet, composed, self-possessed. It sounds like not texting first anymore, not checking his social media, not rearranging your life to make yourself available, not feeding the hope that if you just try harder, he will finally see you. It is choosing to live your life fully, presently, intentionally, without waiting for him to re-enter it. Because the moment you stop centering him, you begin to center yourself. And when that happens, the energy shifts without a single word spoken. Jung described this as withdrawing the projections. You stop projecting your desire for connection onto someone who is not reciprocating it. You stop making him the mirror through which you measure your worth. You reclaim the emotional power you unconsciously gave away. And that's when he notices, not necessarily the next day, not even the next week, sometimes not until he feels the discomfort of your absence in the places where your presence once soothed him. But he notices because the emotional field has changed. The predictability is gone. The quiet comfort of knowing you are still there is gone. The emotional gravity that once pulled you toward him has shifted back to you. And now the question becomes his, not yours. Where did she go? Why isn't she reaching out? Why doesn't she need me anymore? This is where regret begins. Not because you forced it. Not because you tried to prove anything, but because you finally stopped trying. Because the most powerful form of absence is not when you disappear to provoke a reaction. It's when you detach because you finally understand your worth. You become the one thing human nature cannot ignore. A presence that no longer waits. A heart that does not beg. A soul that refuses to shrink to be chosen. And the moment you embody that truth, everything changes. There is a particular kind of silence that is not empty at all. It is full of meaning, full of realization, full of the weight of what is no longer being given. When you stop offering your attention, your warmth, your softness, your steady presence, the absence of those things begins to speak louder than anything you could have said out loud. And this is where most people misunderstand power in relationships. They think power comes from speaking, explaining, convincing, pleading. But real power is in what you no longer feel obligated to express. Carl Jung wrote, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." The moment you pull back your energy, the other person is forced to look into theirs. Not because you demanded reflection, but because you removed the comfort that allowed them to avoid it. When you were always the one reaching out first, checking in, bridging the emotional distance, you were the one carrying the weight of the connection. You were the one making it easy for him not to show up. And as long as you were doing that, he never had to confront the truth of what he was giving or not giving. But now, in your silence, that truth becomes visible. The imbalance becomes undeniable because the connection no longer runs on your effort alone. And this is where the internal shift begins inside him. He starts to feel something he did not feel before: uncertainty. And uncertainty is powerful because certainty keeps people comfortable. Uncertainty forces the psyche to pay attention. Suddenly, he isn't sure what your silence means. He isn't sure what you're thinking. He isn't sure what you are feeling. He isn't sure if he still has access to you. And this not knowing makes him feel something he hasn't felt in a while: the possibility of loss. Human beings value what they believe they could lose, not because we are cold or selfish, but because emotional presence only becomes real to us when it is not guaranteed. This is not manipulation when it is psychology. It is instinct. It is how attachment works. When someone who once felt deeply familiar suddenly becomes unpredictable, the mind cannot ignore it. It begins to question, to replay memories, to analyze moments that were once overlooked. The way you used to show up, the softness in your tone when you cared, the sincerity in your eyes when you listened, the depth of your presence when you loved. He begins to remember what he didn't appreciate when he still had it. But here is the part that is most important. Your silence is only powerful when it is real, when it is rooted in self-respect, not performance. When you are not withholding out of spite, but releasing out of clarity. Because there is a profound difference between stepping back to be chased and stepping back because you finally understand that your value is not dependent on whether someone chooses you. And when that is your reason, the energy changes entirely. You are no longer waiting for his message. You are no longer rehearsing what you would say if he came back. You are no longer checking for signs. You are no longer trying to be remembered. You are living, not loudly, not performatively, not as a show, but gently, steadily in alignment with yourself again. You start investing in your own world, your thoughts, your peace, your routines, your creative pursuits, your friendships, your rituals, the things that remind you you are whole. You begin to rebuild the parts of yourself that had been slowly dissolving in the name of keeping him close. You begin to remember how to exist without negotiating your emotional availability to match his inconsistency. This is the part few people tell you about. When you stop chasing someone else's presence, you rediscover your own. And with that rediscovery comes a new internal gravity, a new center. You become grounded in a way that changes not just how you relate to him, but how you relate to yourself. And that change is unmistakable. You move slower. You respond less quickly. You speak only when something needs to be said. You stop justifying yourself. You stop explaining your worth. You stop making yourself emotionally accessible to someone who did not earn that access. This is not coldness. This is clarity. Jung said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." You are not resisting the loss anymore. You are accepting the reality of the dynamic. And through that acceptance, you transform. Meanwhile, he begins to feel the contrast, the shift from being the center of your emotional world to becoming just one part of your life, rather than the focal point of it. He begins to wonder where you are directing your attention now. He begins to wonder what fills your thoughts now that he no longer does. Because attention is not invisible. It has weight, and when you move it, the shift is felt. This is when he begins to revisit his choices. He starts thinking about what he did not value when it was offered freely. He remembers your patience on the days he was distant. He remembers your softness in moments when he gave you very little to work with. He remembers how you were always the one who understood when he did not explain. He remembers how you cared without being asked. And most importantly, he realizes that you are no longer extending that care. Not because you are angry, but because you are done placing your heart where it is not held. That realization is what creates regret, not the loss itself, but the understanding of what he lost, and whether he reaches out or not, whether he tries to return or doesn't. Something has already changed. You are no longer the woman who chases. You are the woman who chooses. And the moment you become the one who chooses, everything that once felt out of your control begins to move in your favor. There is a quiet awakening that happens when you stop centering someone who did not know how to hold you. It doesn't arrive all at once. It unfolds slowly, like a curtain pulling back to reveal a room you didn't realize you had been living in. This awakening is not about him at all. It is about you. It is about remembering the parts of yourself you abandoned, while trying to preserve a connection that was slowly draining you. Because the truth is, you didn't just lose him. You lost pieces of yourself along the way. The version of you that was grounded, clear, full of your own presence. The version of you that didn't need to prove your worth to anyone. The version of you that moved through the world with self-trust, self-respect, and self-knowing. When you were trying to keep him, you slowly stopped keeping yourself. You lowered your standards just a little at first. You tolerated small inconsistencies. You softened your voice when you should have spoken clearly. You excused behavior that required accountability. You chose patience when what was needed was reciprocity. And you did all of this not because you lacked dignity, but because you loved. You believed in potential. You believed in what the connection could be, not what it was. You were loyal to the possibility of him. And there is something deeply human about that. But now something else is happening. The emotional energy you once poured outward is starting to return home to you. Your internal world is becoming louder than your longing. Your needs are no longer background noise. Your heart is speaking more clearly than your hope. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the moment where you begin to see what was unconscious. You begin to recognize the ways you abandoned yourself in the name of keeping him comfortable. You begin to see how your generosity became self-neglect. You begin to see how your patience became acceptance of emotional crumbs. You begin to realize you were showing up at 100% in a connection where he rarely crossed 40. There is no anger in this realization, no bitterness, just truth. And truth is the beginning of liberation. You start to understand that you were not too much. You were just offering too much of yourself to someone who offered too little in return. And now you are learning to recenter. Recentering yourself is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not a declaration. It is a quiet return to your own presence. It looks like your mornings becoming your own again. Your thoughts no longer looping around what he is thinking. Your weekends filling with things that nourish you instead of waiting for his availability. Your phone no longer being an altar you kneel at for validation. Your life begins to expand again. Not all at once, gently, steadily, naturally. You rediscover the things that fill you, the books, the music, the quiet moments, the long walks, the conversations that feel alive. You reconnect with the people who see you clearly. You remember what it feels like to laugh without effort, to breathe without anticipation, to exist without waiting. And this is where the psychological shift in him deepens. Because when your energy returns to yourself, your presence changes. Your aura, the emotional field around you, becomes grounded. You no longer reach. You no longer chase. You no longer wait. You simply are. And that is what becomes magnetic. It is not indifference. It is not coldness. It is not detachment for the sake of appearing strong. It is self-possession. You are no longer trying to convince anyone of your worth. You simply know it. And here is where the unexpected happens. He starts to feel the imbalance. Not the one where you were giving and he was taking, but the new one where you are steady and he is unsure. When you were available, he did not have to choose you. Now if he wants you, he must decide. When you were always there, he never had to reflect. Now in your silence, he must remember. When you were giving, he did not have to value. Now in your absence, he must evaluate. This is the moment where he begins to feel the emotional weight of what he did not protect. Not because you forced him to, not because you hoped he would, but because human nature responds to loss by confronting truth. He begins to realize that your love was not ordinary. Your presence was not replaceable. Your energy was not easily found. He begins to see that what you offered cannot be replicated by someone new, because your love was not convenience, it was depth. Your care was not performance, it was sincerity. Your presence was not attachment, it was devotion, and devotion is rare. But here is the part that matters more than anything. Even if he realizes all of this, even if he comes back, even if he reaches out with clarity, it will not mean what it once would have meant. Because the woman he took for granted no longer exists. You are no longer the version of yourself who was waiting to be chosen. You are now the version who chooses herself first. And that changes everything. Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself, requires the dissolution of illusions. And this is exactly what you are experiencing now. The illusion that love must be proven. The illusion that effort earns belonging. The illusion that worth is determined by someone else's recognition. All of those illusions are falling away. You are seeing clearly. You are choosing differently. You are returning to yourself. And in that return, you have already won. Whether he regrets losing you or not, your life is no longer paused for his realization. You are moving forward, steady, certain, whole. There comes a point in this journey where something shifts inside. You so quietly you almost don't notice it at first. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's not the surge of confidence people talk about when they say they finally moved on. No, it's something much more subtle, more profound, more rooted. It is the moment you realize you are no longer waiting. Not waiting to be chosen, not waiting to be understood, not waiting to be pursued, not waiting for him to change, not waiting for the story to resolve in the way you once imagined. You simply stop waiting. This is not the kind of detachment that comes from exhaustion. It's not a breaking point. It's not a collapse. It's a return to yourself, a quiet, steady, grounded return. You begin to recognize that your life continues with or without his presence. Your heart beats. Your breath flows. Your days unfold. Your depth remains. Your worth remains. And that realization is not just healing. It is transformational. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that is exactly what begins here. Not who you were when you were trying to hold on to him. Not who you were when you were adjusting yourself to fit what he offered. But who you are when your soul is no longer negotiating for love. Your steps become slower but not hesitant, intentional. Your voice becomes softer but not uncertain, measured. Your presence becomes lighter but not weak, unburdened. And this new energy does not just change how you feel within yourself. It changes how others feel when they are around you. People begin to respond differently. Some draw closer, sensing your groundedness. Others fall away, unable to stay in connection with someone who no longer needs to be needed to feel whole. Meanwhile, he feels the shift too. At first it's subtle, a passing thought, a flicker of memory, a quick glance at his phone wondering if there is something there that isn't. But over time, the silence begins to penetrate. Your absence creates an emotional echo, one that mirrors back to him the fullness of what he once received from you. And the more grounded and self-present you become, the more he begins to feel the imbalance within himself. He had someone who saw him deeply, and he didn't see you back. He had someone who was emotionally available, and he remained half-present. He had someone willing to grow, and he stayed comfortable where he was. But now the dynamic has reversed. You are expanding. He is now the one who feels the insufficiency. You are evolving. He is now the one who feels behind. You are rising. He is now the one who sees what he could have had, but no longer has unquestioned access to. This is not about superiority. It is not about winning. It is not about making him feel small. It is simply the natural consequence of emotional growth. Because when one person grows, the relationship either rises with them or it dissolves. And if he reaches out now, and often he will, it will not sound like the dramatic confessions people write about in stories. It may not even sound like regret at first. It starts with something much simpler. Hey, how have you been? I was just thinking about you. But do not mistake simplicity for lack of depth. Those small words carry an entire internal shift behind them. They mean, I feel the change. I feel your absence. I feel what I didn't value when I had it. I feel the loss of your energy. I feel the difference in myself now that you are no longer holding the emotional weight for both of us. And here is the part where your growth is tested. Because the old you would hear those words and immediately fill the space with warmth, offering reassurance without being asked. The old you would have poured yourself back into the conversation, eager to reconnect. The old you would have taken crumbs and tried to make a meal. But the new you knows something vital. Someone wanting you back is not the same as someone being ready to hold you. So when he comes back, and he likely will, you do not rush in. You do not run toward him. You do not abandon your growth to return to an old dynamic. You listen, not just to his words, to his effort, not just to his desire, to his consistency, not just to his affection, to his accountability. You are no longer moved by emotion alone. You are moved by alignment. And if he has not grown, if he has not awakened, if he has not met himself the way you have met yourself, then his return is not a homecoming. It is a test. The test is not whether you can get him back. The test is whether you can remain loyal to your evolution. Because you did not walk this path to end up where you started. You did not learn to love yourself just to hand your worth away again. You did not rebuild your heart just to place it back in unsteady hands. This is where you decide, does he return because he sees your value now? Or does he return because he feels the loss? These are not the same. One leads to renewal. The other leads to repetition. And you have outgrown repetition. You have become someone who no longer needs love to prove your value. You have become someone who no longer needs attention to feel seen. You have become someone who no longer needs to be chosen to feel whole. This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of your becoming. And if he truly wants you now, he must rise to meet you. Not the woman who once waited, but the woman who now stands. There is a turning point where the story no longer revolves around what you lost, but around what you found within yourself in the process. This is where the healing becomes transformation, where absence becomes rebirth, where letting go becomes alignment. You are no longer orbiting around someone else's emotional availability. You have returned to your own center, and from this center you move differently. You speak differently. You choose differently. The most profound shifts in life are not loud. They are quiet rearrangements of identity. They happen in the pauses, in the moments when you no longer respond in the old ways, in the spaces where you would have once reached, but now you exhale instead. Where you would have once waited, but now you continue forward. Where you would have once tried to hold together a fading connection, but now you trust that anything that cannot meet you cannot stay. Carl Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And now you are choosing, no longer to be the woman who hopes, but the woman who knows. No longer the woman who tries to be worthy, but the woman who understands her worth inherently. No longer the woman who positions herself to be chosen, but the woman who chooses. You have crossed an invisible threshold, though there was no ceremony to mark it. No applause, no witness, just a quiet internal shift. You are not simply healing from him. You are evolving beyond the version of yourself that believed love had to be earned. This changes everything, because now, when love returns, whether from him or someone new, it must meet you where you are, not where you used to be. You no longer entertain halfway love. You no longer settle for connection rooted in convenience. You no longer bend to be understood. You no longer dim to be tolerated. Your softness did not disappear, but became selective. Your heart did not harden. It refined its doors. Your love did not shrink. It became discerning. You are still capable of deep devotion, but now it is sacred. It is not offered freely to those who have not earned the right to receive it. It is not poured into people who do not know how to hold it. It is not given to fill someone else's emptiness while you starve. Now your love nourishes you first. This is not selfishness. It is self-respect. It is emotional maturity. It is spiritual alignment. You are no longer trying to be understood. You are choosing to be at peace. And peace changes the atmosphere of your life. Your days feel different. Your body feels lighter. Your thoughts move more slowly. Your nervous system no longer waits for emotional uncertainty. The version of you that once lived on emotional high alert has been laid to rest. In her place stands a woman who trusts herself. And trust in yourself becomes the foundation for everything else. Love, purpose, boundaries, standards, identity. Now when someone enters your life, they are not stepping into the space of a woman searching for validation. They are stepping into the presence of a woman who knows her value, who protects her peace, and who guards her heart not out of fear, but out of reverence. And if he returns, the one who once took your presence for granted, he will feel this difference immediately. He will feel it in the way you do not rush to respond, in the way your tone is calm instead of eager, in the way your silence holds dignity, not longing, in the way your presence no longer reaches toward him but stands in its own fullness. This does not mean you are cold. It means you are whole. If he has grown, truly grown, he will meet you here with clarity, accountability, and intention. He will not come back with confusion or hesitation. He will come back with steadiness, with consistency, with the willingness to show up in the ways he once avoided. Because a man who understands his loss does not return casually. He returns with direction. But if he has not grown, if he still lingers in uncertainty, if his words remain softer than his actions, if his presence still requires you to shrink, you will feel that immediately too. And now, you will not negotiate with that feeling. You will not justify. You will not wait for potential. You will not try to guide him into becoming the man you hoped he would be. You will simply release him, with peace, because the lesson has already been learned. Your worth is not determined by who stays. Your value is not measured by who recognizes it. Your identity is not defined by who chooses you. You are the one who chooses now. You choose your peace. You choose your emotional safety. You choose your alignment. You choose your future. You choose yourself. And when a woman chooses herself, sincerely, wholly finally, she becomes unforgettable. Not because someone regrets losing her, but because she no longer needs to be remembered. Your story does not end with him realizing your worth. Your story continues with you realizing your own. You did not lose anything that was meant for the woman you are becoming. You simply outgrew the version of yourself who believed love required chasing. Now you love without losing yourself. Now you give without abandoning your needs. Now you open your heart without surrendering your worth. And whoever enters your life from this point forward, whether it is him, transformed, or someone entirely new, will have to meet you where you now stand. Whole, steady, clear, aligned, rooted. Enough. The chapter with him was not a mistake. It was a mirror, a lesson, a doorway, a transformation. It taught you what love is not, so you could learn what love must be. And now you walk forward, not with longing, not with regret, but with quiet certainty. You are not waiting anymore. You are becoming, and the world you are walking into is one that finally matches your depth.